Welcome, friends, to our Ingenuity Talk series. Today, I have a dear friend of mine, Gary Davis, from Dorrier Underwood. So, Gary, welcome. Gary is a well-respected keynote and a public speaker. You worked in many sectors, including finance, IT, banking, hospitality, and obviously, you're known for your humor, your humanity, and your insight into public speaking. So welcome, and thank you for making the time. Gary and I met actually many years ago while we were launching the hospitality industry, and I might say, that was probably where I feel like I achieved my biggest breakthrough. And I believe I've had this conversation with you many times, and the work you do is tremendous. And and it works, right? And understanding how you work, I think, can be the biggest breakthrough for any individual, right? How can you make something else better if you yourself aren't good?
Well, it's kind of where it comes from, right?
Yeah.
Kind of the whole idea of working on a culture or having a transformation inside an organization all comes from how am I contributing to it? And you get enough people asking that question, something miraculous happens. We met, I was giving a talk to your group about I've been now working with Dorrier Underwood for a little over a decade, and we work with organizations. We don't work with individuals because we want to work on the system. We work on the whole thing. And we work on the individuals because that's what makes the system. Humans create, we think that there's stuff actually beyond our creation, but everything that's happening, it's our creation. We're the reason that the place is the way it is.
That's true. Very true. So Gary, I mean, you had an extensive career path. So I always like to ask this question, but what is if you had to explain who's Gary Davis? Could you describe yourself in 30 to 60 seconds?
Well, I mean, I would say that who I am is an expert in transformation, and transformation is having things be a way you say you want them to be. And background from working inside of sales and organizations like a software company where things are changing and you're having to create a vision for people to see a new way for things to go, to being an alcoholic and being 30 years sober.
Those are non-alcoholic.
That's good. That's good. So, being an alcoholic is the ultimate transformation, because while you still want to drink, you change how you view yourself.
Right.
While you still are the same way.
Right.
You're not changed. You're still want the drink. You just don't have the drink. Just like inside of an organization, you still want to be mad at the VP of sales, but you just love them anyway.
Right.
And you don't go with your biological imperative to survive the system and be right. You go with, what am I going to create here?
And I mean, I think you guys have created a tremendous program with Dorrier Underwood, right? I mean, it was a really big component of our organization when we were shifting our culture with Echelon. And I think that for me, again, it changed my life and so many other executives that worked for us at that time. But if I had to ask you, how do you change lives?
Well, it's going to what's actually said. So when you talk to somebody about how life is, and you have them see something about how it is, that it is that way, then it changes how they see things. I'll give you an example, right? We work a lot on seeing that your opinions are just opinions.
That's right.
And that most of the things you think are a way are just that way because you think they're that way. We work really hard on getting people to see all the way down how much of what they think is the way things are is actually their upbringing, their background. They're bringing the thing to it. Somebody even saying, well, they were really angry. Even they were really angry in the meeting. It's like, really? Well, what happened? Because they weren't angry in the meeting. They said they didn't like your proposal, and they said it in a high volume.
Right.
And so it's like, it's interesting. How do you change somebody's life? You have them see the world a new way, because if you see the world a different way, everything looks different. It's kind of like with Helen Keller, the story of the miracle worker. When they put the water in her hand, in a moment she got water, but really what she got was a whole world. And if all of a sudden you get that you think you're right about everything, I've told you this before, G, right? You think you're right about everything you think.
Yeah.
And if all of a sudden you deal with, oh, do I really think I'm right about everything I think? And when I say that to people, sometimes they say, no, I'm not right about everything I think. So, well, you right about that?
Yeah. Are you?
If you're right about that, then you're still being right. I mean, you know you've been wrong. And you know you'll be wrong again. But right now, everything you think you're right about that. And so revealing that to somebody, not changing it, I'm not trying to change it, I'm just saying notice that you think you're right. And guess what? Every other human being is the same way. And we're all defensive, and we're all inauthentic, and we don't have integrity. And we work on these things to say, don't worry about everybody else, just look for you.
Sure.
And if you look for you and you see it, it changes your life when you see it, right?
It does. And again, that's practice, right? It's just constantly working on it. And I think that's one of the things that, that stuck with me. It's like, this is not, you don't just say, okay, check, done, right? It's a constant journey. You have to reevaluate yourself, see where you're at, and make those adjustments. And I do want to add a clip note to our audience who's watching, right? A lot of times, and maybe I'm just slow, right? But a lot of times you say things, and I was like, what the hell did he say? So I'm sure people are going to watch this multiple times because you say some things that really trigger your brain and like, what? Did he really say that, or am I just not understanding what he's saying?
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to the thing that you were saying about what has people have something different happen. Is because we're challenging the way it's always been for you. And when you challenge the way it is for somebody, your brain is not interested in that. Your brain just wants things to be the way they've always been. Essentially I talk about the brain like it's a human. It's just an organ with, stuff secreting over it. It's got folds and it's got neural networks. And the more we learn about the brain, the more we realize that we're just set up to survive, and to do anything else takes intellectual effort. Like you were just saying, it takes a little intellectual effort. It doesn't take any intellectual effort to get up and blame people for how bad things are, to see how unfair life is, and to see that you are a victim.
For sure.
It takes a lot of intellectual effort to have somebody steal your car and ask yourself, now how did I cause that? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we worked a lot on you being causing the matter of things in your life that you're very sure you didn't cause.
Of course not. I mean, why am I wrong? I don't know.
Right, but that's right. Why am I wrong? Well, it's not so much why are you wrong, it's why would you want to be right? Because if you're right that it's not your cause that had things happen, then that has you be powerless. But if you come at life like there's nothing in life that I don't have some cause in, then it gives you somewhere to interact with life that you can actually do something. There's Don Juan has this saying about how life is, and it's that most people, see life as a blessing or a curse.
Okay.
But another way to interact with life is that nothing's a blessing and nothing's a curse. It's all you're doing, and he says other people interact with life like it's a challenge. Mm. And when someone gives up the challenge of life, it's because they're now saying someone else is to blame, someone else did that. Why would you want to do that? Well, the question is so you can have the things you want to have in life happen. That's the only reason.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and to recognize that, right? One, you have to be susceptible to it. Right?
Yeah.
And as an individual, you have to be susceptible. It's like, okay, I want to change. And I remember when I came into your program, I was going through these other executive coaching, groups or teams. And I felt so amazing. I was like, oh my God, this was the best mental orgasm I had. And then that was it.
Yeah, smoke a cigarette and forget about it, right?
Have a couple of martinis. And then I was like, gosh, and I did that for years. And it came to a point, it's like, man, all of my organization's looking at me as a leader, but am I being really a true leader? Because I was so lost. I was so confused, and I didn't even know what I was doing. Right? I just put one foot in front of the other, and I continue. And it requires a certain superpower or a human way of thinking, right? To enable for that other individual to engage or to understand. So what makes you that being who has that superpower, who's able to help other individuals break through, right? And decompartmentalize themselves and really say, oh wow, I do understand.
Well, I think there's one thing that's definitely different than what you were doing, is that when I came in, I wasn't working with you, I was working with the team. Because the team is a system. People think they're individuals, which is a little bit of an illusion that
Right.
you are an individual, because you are part of something with other people, because the language that people use around each other creates who you are. So when everyone's speaking a certain way, it kind of keeps generating people being who they are. So we worked, instead of with you, we were working with the other people.
Right.
And we were saying, yeah, I got it. G's a a-hole. I got it. but you're the problem.
Right.
And then we were saying to you, yeah, I got it. They won't listen to you. But you're the problem.
Right.
And we worked on you and we worked on them, and that created a clearing for something to occur where you started to see how it would work differently if you were coming from a different place. So that's the one thing, is I think that because we work on the system instead of the individuals, although we work on the individuals, but we don't work with the individuals.
No.
If you had a friend who wanted to coach, I've got somebody I could recommend for him. Unless he's looking at working on his organization, and we could start with he or she and see what we could create for the organization. But the work we do is really organizational. And the other thing I would say is, it doesn't always work.
No.
You,
I've seen it.
You were coachable. Like
Right.
the other thing, I think maybe to the credit of all the people you'd worked with, maybe they had gotten you to a place of being coachable.
Mm-hmm.
So I could say things to you, pretty straight things, kinds of things we don't want to say on video. And you would go, okay, you would remember, one of the things I remember was the way you were going to be when you went to the restaurant and things weren't right.
Oh my God. Yeah.
And the amount of intellectual effort it took for you to come from something other than making people wrong, and they must know, and how could they not?
But they weren't wrong. They just weren't doing it right.
Exactly. Well, yeah. So right, they were doing it the way they were doing it,
That's
and
right.
everything they were doing they thought was right. And again, it's like you want to impact those people, but the way you were impacting them wasn't having the result that you wanted. We wanted to have
Sure.
a different impact on them. So I think a lot of the reason it works is because of having the system. And then if you're working with a group of people, my experience is, you give me a leadership team of 7 to 10 people, I can reach 70% of them.
Right.
And then once you get a critical mass of people starting to be responsible for the way things are, like not just be in it thinking that it's a certain way and I'm just here, but actually getting that they're creating how it is by the way they speak. Then the ones that don't want to be coachable or don't come along, they kind of either leave or they get in a place where it's hard for them not to join.
Sure.
So I think that's if there was a secret, that's the secret to impacting an organization, is to and also working with a place high enough in it that the people you're working with doesn't have to be the CEO, but the head of a group, the head of a division, so they actually own enough of something in the organization that they can impact.
Right. I mean, so you've been down this career path for a long time, and you've done tremendous work, I'm sure, on yourself, because how do you teach others to do, what you want them to do when you haven't done it yourself? So what made you go down the path of leadership development? What led to that?
Yeah, well, so first, like I said, I was 23 when I got sober.
Okay.
And AA is a 12-step program that's self-development. And the whole purpose of that program is for people to be responsible and accountable and not have resentments and be able to be in a clearing in any moment where they don't have a whole lot of baggage they're carrying. And the reason is because if you're an alcoholic, you have all that, you get triggered and you go drink.
Right.
And so I started that, it was 1989 was when I got sober.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started working with Dorrier Underwood as a client in the 90s.
Okay.
And the first thing that occurred to me is, well, this is AA for people that don't have a drinking problem. It's the same program. It's like, wake up, quit being resentful, you're responsible. And what I realized was that the reason it was so important to be that way when you're an alcoholic is if you have resentments or you have stuff that you're holding on to, or you're not operating from a place of being not a victim,
Mm-hmm.
you might go drink and you're going to die. But, someone's not an alcoholic, they don't do that. They just go home, kick the dog, yell at the wife, you go to bed, get up, and they're just miserable. But I want to help the people who don't have to go all the way to jail for having. I want to help the people that just have people's lives be better. really operating as an organization out of two big goals. One of our big goals is that all workplaces value the whole person at work, and that you can be the dad you are, and you can be the restaurateur you are, and you can be all your whole background, all your beliefs inside of being a commercial real estate person. Like bring everything to that, right? And then the second thing we believe is that all businesses should be up to something other than just profit, because I think that we're seeing a time when the church and the nonprofits and the government, which are the places we've always kind of relied on to make the differences, are not going to make the differences that the businesses can make. So we want to focus on business and have people be up to something bigger. And there's two things that does is if you're up to something bigger, then you're inspired about being the best self you can be. If you're not up to something bigger, money doesn't motivate the same way that significance motivates. I mean, yes, we all want a paycheck.
Sure.
And you need the money. But when you have people that are really see something bigger than money that they're working towards, and they're making a living doing it, and they're also working in a way together that really works to have them not be upset they have to go to work today. I mean, that's what it's all about. So I came up inside of the Dorrier Underwood culture as a client, and right after that, I was that was in '97, and ever since '97, I was trying to figure out how to work with these guys up until 2009 when I started full time with them.
So through that, I mean, what was the, I guess, biggest surprising moment or the aha moment, right? Through it. I mean, I'm sure there's been plenty.
Yeah.
Let's discuss one that really, like, man, I'll remember that, because for me, right, and we'll speak on Dorrier Underwood specifically, was we went through the process of figuring out what your filter is. And I know this segment's not long enough to go into that, but I mean, that for me, it's like the light bulb went off. It's like, oh my God, this is just ever changing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And when you say that, put a little context around filter. It's not like a filter of many. We all have a way we see the world.
That's right.
Kind of the way we've always seen it since we were little, and we keep seeing it that way. And I had a big epiphany when I was working with the company that Dorrier Underwood came into about my own. I'm always in trouble. I'm in trouble that you dropped that. Somehow that was my fault. Now,
why did you move? Yeah.
Right. I'm like, I just walk around kind of being in trouble, and I notice other people are different ways. And if they're different ways, then I must not really be seeing the world the way it is. That's one of the places where you help people to see that you don't see the world the way it is. You see it through some hallucination that your brain is creating called consciousness. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not what's really happening. It's made up. So that was a big epiphany for me. But I tell you, the big one when I started working with Dorrier Underwood that's been really interesting is that the way I've always done things has been a certain way, and it really works. And because it's worked, I don't look for other ways to do things.
Help me expand on that.
So there's some way that you have always wanted. There's some way that, like, for me, it's being glad handy and kind of holding court. I don't know if you know what these things mean. It's the old person thing to say. Like being the one that has all the stories and being the one that's kind of the center and being likable and being funny, and all of those things work really well, except when they don't work. So it's not that that's a flawed way to work. It just doesn't cover every situation. Because there's times when you need to be serious. There's times when you need to listen. Mm-hmm. Whereas some people, they don't have to work on listening, but they don't have maybe a charisma about them, or they're not someone who people want to, like, you have the leader of the company and people aren't inspired. Mm-hmm. So I'm someone that if I took over a company, being inspiring wouldn't be something I'd need to really focus a lot of my work on, but being someone that slowed down and put attention to detail, or being someone that listened longer and didn't have to have a story to tell. Like, the way I hear a story when someone's telling it is, oh, I've been there. Mm-hmm. Let me tell you about what happened when I was there.
Right.
Which works because it keeps the conversation going.
Sure.
And, it also doesn't work because, wait a minute, this story's not about me. This story's about them. I was just at the barbershop because I want to look good for you guys. I just got this lowered, and they did a little bit on the beard, but he was scared because of COVID. But I asked if I'd hold the mask and work on it some. And he told me he lived in Denver, and he told me that he had traveled to Disney, And he told me that all these places he was telling me, and the whole time, all I could have in my head was telling him, oh, I went to Disney, I took my kids, oh yeah, I work in Denver, I do stuff in Denver. And I did just notice it, but whereas before, I would have said it.
Right.
And he was about to tell me he was from Denver. Now, he wouldn't have gotten to tell me he was from Denver if I'd have said, oh, Denver, I go to Denver all the time, you know?
Right.
It's like, oh, what do you do in Denver? And it's like all of a sudden I've stolen the moment.
I can relate to what you're saying, right? Because I feel like I know I'm a terrible listener. One.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. I mean,
Well,
I know.
because you're more like me, because you're
Yeah.
more the showman. I mean, you're more and you don't have to work on being that guy.
Mhm.
You got to work on turning that guy down a little bit. Not turn him off, but like dialing the volume down in the moment. Because what we believe is there's no such thing as the way you are. You're just however you are.
Right.
There's how are you now. And if how you're being now works, great. And if how you're being now doesn't work, stop and be some other way. And that's about as good as it gets.
Right.
And then you live, and then they put you in the ground, and 7 generations from now, nobody knows you were here. That's if you want to know how it's going to go. That's how it's going to go.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And they're going to build a statue to you, and then somebody's going to knock it down. I mean, it's like there's nothing you can do to do it the right way.
For sure.
So you just get up every morning and try again.
And I think going back to the listening part and us having that conscious conversation in our head, it's to me it seems to be, instead of being a better listener, you want to be more relatable. But you're taking 2 steps back by not listening.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you always want to share, okay, well, how do I post the bond with this individual I'm going to have a conversation with? And it's to say, oh, if you're from Denver, oh, I've been to Denver, right?
Yeah.
So mentally, you feel, or emotionally, you feel that you're closing the bond because now you can relate. But at the end of the day, that person's like, well, nobody really gives a shit because I really want to tell you about me.
Yeah, except that, I mean, that's accurate, except that there's another person I'm coaching that's not you, that while I'm working on them is not just to say, uh-huh, and not just to always, not sharing things. Because it also doesn't work to be somebody who occasionally doesn't say, I was in Denver and I've got a big client there. I made a big difference with them. Like sometimes that is what there is to say. So it's not do this one or do that one. It's have both and have it available to you. So whatever on the menu works is what you're doing right now. Like if I came to this interview and I just said, yeah, that's real interesting. I kept asking you about you to say, well, wait a minute, that's not what you're here for.
You're right.
And you're going to interview people who you're going to have to pull things out of them because, and then you got like a guy like me who, you don't have to say anything else. I can do the rest of the whole thing, right? And it's really not so much about there's a way to be. It's more about having all the ways of being be available so you can be the one that works for the situation. Leadership is not being loud or being quiet. Leadership is having something happen that wasn't going to happen that people are glad it happened.
Right.
And however you can make that happen, whether it be listening or whether it be talking or whether it be inspiring or whether it be supporting when somebody else be inspirational, if it leads to something happening that wasn't going to happen that people wanted to happen, good job.
And to that point, right, I mean, you've worked with hundreds, if not thousands of organizations, right? And this is not to put anybody in a spotlight, but what's the biggest breakthrough that you've seen of an individual or an organization that made it that spark in your mind? It's like, man, these guys actually got it. And I know a lot of people get that, because I did.
Yeah.
But what is it, what was that moment, and how did it get there?
Well, I mean, first, there's a lot of confidentiality that I have to really be careful about.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
I can't really say
Yep.
much. But what I find with people is that an entrepreneur has to have a transformation and having it not be all about them. And I've had that happen with multiple people who were able to exit their company because they finally were able to get acquired because they were able to let go of having to be there controlling their thing. I've had them be able to build leadership teams where there was no leadership team. And so that's one example, right? And then another example, which is kind of funny because it's kind of the opposite example,
Right.
is you go into an organization with 70,000 people, and you're working with the HR director for the North American division, and having them actually have the opposite transformation, where they get that there's nothing actually here. There is no company. It's all made up. And they don't have to have it be that it's already a way, that they can actually start declaring how it's going to be, kind of like an entrepreneur declares a company out of nothing.
Right.
That an entrepreneur gets that, like, all of a sudden there's this thing and everybody's reacting to it, and it did not exist. They created it. Whereas a long-term corporate person that's very cynical and resigned has to have the transformation, like, wait, I actually can create something inside of this organization. And seeing people like that wake up and actually start doing it and actually start to get traction, because anytime someone declares something and starts to be in action like that's the way it is and is inspiring, other people are going to jump on board like it really is that way. And it's going to start moving. And have you ever heard the expression, like when you start to move in a certain way, doors open that you didn't see, or the mountain rises to meet you? There's lots of trite ways to say it. Why? Because it's true. You create something, and all of a sudden, it's not that you created that and magic happened.
Right.
It's you created it, and now when you're looking from there, you see all these things that you didn't see that could happen. They were there before. It looks like they just showed up.
Yeah. That reminds me of what was the exact course name? It's such a
Being a leader in the effective exercise of leadership.
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, it's pretty descriptive,
Yeah,
right? Being a leader and the effective exercise of leadership.
And I think that's where we're talking about, the whole concept of you don't pull from the past, but you pull from the future.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I'm a product of my past. No, you're not. You're not a product of your past at all. Tell a story, G. You did well.
no. I mean, this show's about you.
Yeah.
Because,
but I mean, it's a really good point, because people think they're a product of their past.
It's. I mean, come on. That was a 6-month long course,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's a
I
pretty
might
good
as well
little
say,
piece, though.
It was a mind fuck, right?
Okay.
I mean, because thing is, like, you're taught to believe in a certain way, and you get shattered, right?
It turns out what you believe what you saw, right?
And especially if you adopt to the concept of, oh my God, that is true, and I've been living backwards the entire time, right? And when we say, okay, my upbringing was, I was an immigrant, grew up in India, didn't have much, so I always told myself that, oh my God, I gotta have a drive because I gotta provide, and that's what's molded me. But no, it's actually that I don't want to have that in future, so therefore in present, that's how I'm operating.
Yeah.
That's the simplest way I can kind of put that.
Yeah, that we're given by our future
Right.
is not what it looks like. And if you're given by your future and the future hasn't happened, you can actually be given by something else. And if you're given by your past, then there's nothing to do.
That's right.
The past is in the past, although past is a funny thing because we don't really know what happened even yesterday. And I was reading this thing the other day, and it said even the things you remember, like you remember when you were like 10 years old and you blew out the cake candles?
I'm a 9, but yeah.
9. Well, it turns out that you actually aren't remembering that. You're actually remembering the last time you remembered it. So the last time somebody said something about cake and candles and you remember that, that's what you're remembering now. And so there's like when people say they know what it was like to be 16 or they know what it was like to be in their 20s, they have no idea what happened. They've got a story, a likely story, where they're the hero of.
Right.
And it's this whole generational, we won't get into that. The whole generational thing is being given by faulty memory.
Right.
Where people think that it was a certain way. And the young people now that are a victim, they'll be able to conspire against the young people that aren't born yet one day. So it'll just keep moving. Socrates said, these kids today, what are we going to do with them? And I don't know how old he is. That's, Socrates said, what about these kids today? What are we going to do with them? And it's like so we've got an interesting workplace, and I'm glad to work in a place where we get people to see that the way they see it isn't the way it is, so they can be open to the experience of having other people's view be a valid view, as a view, so that they can see what they can do together.
Absolutely. God is like, while you're talking, a lot of times when I do these interviews, I'm kind of narrating and, feeding the questions, but it's so difficult because I get in my own head, like, well, what if? I'm like, shoot, I have to introduce.
Yeah, you gotta get back, they're doing the thing,
Yeah.
right? Well, I was saying, you go to lunch and record it, right?
That's
And then
right.
it'd be the same.
That's right. We've had some really good conversations over lunch. you
Yeah.
know. But, you know, and this might be a question that I know you like to speak from the positive light, but what have you experienced to be some of the biggest or bigger downfalls of individuals that, you know, you like to coach or would like have to coach, or executives, even as I say, to kind of round it out, that you see in your realm of coaching?
Well, I'm not sure if I know what you're asking, so I'm gonna start there.
Okay.
Like, are you asking me what's the biggest thing that people deal with, or are you saying what's a big problem in business?
I guess what I'm saying is, like, what are some of the downfalls that you see that individuals have, right, that they have to overcome when you go into this executive coaching?
Oh, if you go into working with what I do,
Yeah.
well, first, that you're this as big a jerk as anybody. And you immediately
Me
have to-
specifically?
Me, like, what I had to deal with in order to do this work was, if I'm gonna work on this with people, I have to be like more coachable than you. I have to be willing to take coaching I think is stupid. I have to go and do it. I have to see why the person was saying that. You know, I have to have someone complain to me about how I am, and then I have to say, what they're saying is actually wrong, and I'm still gonna listen to it because there's a reason they're saying it. You know, you ever have somebody tell you something, give me an example, and they give you an example as a bad example?
Right.
Well, why do you need an example? They already told you what it's like to be with you. If I'm gonna be a good coach, I've gotta be able to hear that. I've gotta be able to hear clients say, this is not working, and not be defensive. And, I mean, one of the big things I worked on was my face. Like, when something bad would happen, I would kind of go,
What?
and Nancy Dorrier, who is the source of our work and is just amazing, used to call it the hang dog look. Like, they would get on me, they start coaching me about something. And I call it getting on me because I'm country, but they weren't getting on me, they were just coaching me about something. They were saying, this does not work. And I would just start looking real pathetic. And she's like, quit doing that. Quit, you're making it harder for me to coach you when you're looking like that. But can you imagine the level of coaching you have to be in those kinds of conversations every day, all day? Like, people deal with me like, you know, a couple of times a month.
Right.
You know, I'm dealing with my people, and they were in my ear every night. And so one of the things, Jane Smith, who was the person that probably did the most training of me locally here, she said, when we start working together, I'm going to find out about the monster. I'm going to find out about the monster in you. You're going to find out about the monster in me. Everybody that starts with this says, well, I love coaching. I'm coachable. I love taking coaching. Nobody loves coaching. That's why, if you think you love coaching, you just haven't gotten any really good coaching yet. Because coaching is something that is you being wrong, and your brain does not want to be wrong.
No.
So if the coaching sounds good to you, it's not very hard. But if the coaching sounds way off, and you're coming up with all kind of defenses, that's probably pretty good coaching. And a bum on the street, and I shouldn't use that term, I think that's an old man term. So if someone on the street could coach me, because they're not me, so they could see me a way I don't see myself. There's nobody that can't coach you. So that's the other thing. So if you're going to be in this role, you've got to be on the lookout for coaching all the time, and you've got to keep dealing with yourself and building muscle. Because if I'm going to teach you how to be, a triathlon winner, I need to be able to run a triathlon. And I'm going to coach you, and I've got to have taken that hard coaching and got with the dark night of the soul of screw these people. They don't know me. Which is something somebody's going to say about me when I'm coaching them. So if I haven't said that to myself, if I haven't had that kind of, like, I just can't go on anymore, then I'm not going to be very valuable. And that's why being in an organization is so valuable. And not that being an individual coach isn't a great way to go, but because we're an organization, we're not just a loosely affiliated organization. We're
Right.
all W-2 employees that work for the company, and we know about all of everyone else's clients. And because of that, we're in each other's faces. And I'm sitting in front of a room of people saying, you've got to talk to Barbara. Just like I told Carol last night that she was full of it. And that she needs to straighten up and listen. And Carol's like, thank you, I got it.
Right.
And she can say the same thing to me. And we're just listening for being coachable so that we can coach.
So I'm going to take a couple of steps back here because there's a question I wanted to ask that triggered my brain, but then I started thinking about our conversation, so I'm going to go back to it. The word entrepreneur gets thrown out a lot, and you work with organizations, you work with individuals who are self-employed, or individuals who think they're entrepreneurs. Define what does entrepreneur mean to you?
Well, so first, I don't want to pretend to have some amazing definition. I'm not even sure if I know the dictionary definition.
That's fine.
It seems to me like an entrepreneurial is something that creates something from nothing, right? Like it didn't exist and now it does, and that is very risky. And so it's like they're putting in either their time or their capital to create something from nothing. And then once it's created, people can show up and start being a part of it.
Right.
So it's, even the second person, you could be an entrepreneur if you're second or third because you've given up your time or your opportunity to do something with a company that exists to go and start this thing. And then inside of an organization, it's the same thing. Like you're inside of a big company. We work with some really big companies that have thousands and thousands of employees.
Right.
You can still be entrepreneurial because you say, we're going to do this.
Sure.
And you put your time and your treasure behind having that happen in the organization that's never done that before. That's entrepreneurial to me.
No, I mean, indeed. So I consider myself an entrepreneur, holistically.
Really?
I think so.
I think so too.
I think so.
We look up entrepreneur, there's you with your little suit on.
Not all, apparently entrepreneurs are shorts and t-shirts.
Yeah, right.
But, this segment and this series, the entire intention was to bring out insight that individuals, when they watch this, they like something clicks, right?
Yeah.
And being an entrepreneur, we are just such a, go, hustle, figure it out, build something, create something. But end of the day, figuring out how you work and how you operate is the most vital and important piece as you're building an organization or leading an organization, or if you're just a solo entrepreneur. And I think that many entrepreneurs do not allow themselves to give that time, right? Because it's such a bootstrap operation, they're not taking time to reflect on, okay, well, how do I really need to behave and operate and do so you can be a true entrepreneur, not just somebody who's self-employed, who's solved a problem and now you're just working for that problem, right? It's something that can be created and then that can generate and operate and turn into a legacy brand of its own without you being a piece of it.
Yeah, right.
And
Something
I
bigger
think
than you. Right.
That's one of the things that when we first started, and I said, that's what I wanted to do. Because, as I said, I have a really short attention span, and once I do something, okay, it's done, now I want to move on to the next thing, and I'm hoping that I'll continue to roll down that path, and that's the joy I get, and that's part of the piece that I want to kind of put out there for individuals who are entrepreneurs, practicing entrepreneurship, to know that you can't really work on the bigger idea until you really work on yourself and you know how you operate. So.
Yeah, I think that it's right, because if you're going to be someone who ever leads people, then you've got to get ready for that every day.
Right.
You got to be ready before you need it. And there's lots of ways that people work on themselves. Obviously I love to work with people, and we work with organizations where we do, but even places where we can't figure out how to make it work to do what we're doing, there are some really basic things to start putting your attention on that will change the way everything looks. Meditation, diet, exercise. People don't have time for that, okay? But you're going to break down.
Right.
Right?
It is.
You're going to break down. And then the other thing is to really start to interview people about what it's like to be you. Because you don't really know who you are. Who you are is the story everybody has about you. Like your internal story about who you are is does not matter. It does not matter.
No.
All that matters is what other people would say about you, because that's you being in the world. When people say being, your thoughts are not who you're being. Who you're being is whatever people say about how you're being. And whatever people are out there saying about you is where you're going to find any success you have, unless you just are, I don't know, they call them trust fund babies, you don't really need anything. Then you can just, and be interested in your own story and sit around and live your life without worrying about what anybody thinks.
For sure.
But if you're trying to actually have something happen in the world, what other people think is everything. So I hear people say, well, I don't care what other people think. It's like, well, that's who you are, whatever they think. You don't exist except for people talking about you.
Sure.
So I think that an entrepreneur that wants to really be successful has to spend some time and attention on what it's like to be them, such that they can get what it's like to be with them, so that they can interact with people from some knowledge of that.
And you have to do a lot of things. I think, when we met last time, you talked about, you are on a full-on exercise streak, right?
I am still on my streak.
You're still on it?
Yeah,
There you go.
2018, January 1st.
So-
I'm 2 years and 7 months into exercising every day.
Wow.
But
Solid.
Harry Connick Jr. did 10 years, and he's just a dumb singer from New Orleans. If he can do 10 years, I can do 10 years. So that's my goal, is to do 10 years every day.
Wow, that's strong. I mean, that's really commendable, and I need to get back onto that, because I found that to be kind of me time and my time. I've talked about it before, so I won't go more to it. But aside from exercising, what is that one thing that you do that allows you to show up as Gary Davis when you are coaching or when you are in the office? What is that one thing that you feel like you do really well for yourself that helps you to?
Well, I mean, I would say that I said a little bit about it before. It's that I'm in a program. So our company has a retreat every quarter. I'm in a coaching program inside of my organization. I'm working on myself, and I'm working on myself, not whatever I think I need to do, but listening to somebody else. And so inside of having a person who, anybody who's successful, if you look at all these successful people, this is trite to say it, they probably have a coach. They may not even call them a coach. They have somebody that's helping them that's not them. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if I all of a sudden said, you know what, I enjoyed you guys, I'm going to do my own thing, that I would miss out on the thing I think you're saying, that the most important thing that has to be me. It's having a group of people, including one person who's a coach, one person who's the boss, one person who's in marketing, talking to me about what we should do in marketing, having people in my life that are helping me to have what I really want to have happen. And is committed to me being successful as I am. And that's something that I bring to the conversations a lot of times with these people. Sometimes the people I'm working with, I'm much more committed to the future they've created than they are.
Right.
Right, G?
For sure.
I mean, sometimes I'm the one that brings the future with me to the meeting, and I'm like, they haven't done anything, and it's like, but you just don't care.
No.
And I do care, and if you got me coming
care.
around, I'm coming around, and I'm bringing your future. So for me, the thing I have is people who are bringing my future, and are making sure that I remember what I said I was interested in. Because at the end of the day, there's no right path. Mm-hmm. It's pretty much like all paths lead to nowhere. All paths lead to you in the ground, and 7 generations from now, nobody knows who you were, except your name's on a bridge if it doesn't get blown up. It's like, that's how it's going to go. It's like, whatever you decide to do with your life, and you remember this from working with me, that's one of the big moments, is that you can do anything. Mm-hmm. And the fact that that everything doesn't have meaning unless you bring the meaning to it, mm-hmm. is actually not debilitating, it's actually freeing. Because it means you can say and do anything. It's not that all the paths lead to nothing, but that's because the path isn't, they say 1,000 different ways, it's not about the path, it's about being on the path, not getting somewhere. They say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Yeah. We all know the destination.
Yeah. It's the ground.
It's the ground, or they burn you up, or whatever they do with it. If we still do funerals in 100 years, I don't know what the future is going to be, but I got about 50 more years, 40 good ones. If I keep taking care of myself.
All right.
And so what am I going to do with that today? That's all there really is. And of course, I may only have, I may leave here and this would not be a great episode. But I'm saying, I don't know what I've got, right? But I'm saying, It's like, you're inventing it. And because you're inventing it, you can't be a victim of it. And an entrepreneur that starts something, if they become a victim of what they started, then it's going to eat them alive.
Gary, my friend, you always bring the most wisdom that I can obtain in a short period of time, because like my mind's like, God, how am I gonna remember all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I always appreciated your candidness and your willingness to talk. And you know, I ask this question usually, but I'm gonna kind of change it slightly, right? So if you had a microphone in your hand to speak to the world, what would be one piece of homework you would give them to do?
Wow, that's really good. And I know exactly what it would be.
Okay.
It would be, take the case that everybody thinks what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing. And instead of telling people they're wrong, try to figure out why they think that. I mean, it's kind of what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding in a different way. I mean, it's like, at the end of the day, everybody thinks they're right. And I'm not saying people aren't doing bad things. But even the people doing bad things, if you want them to stop doing the things that you deem as bad, you've got to get into your own head about why would that be so? Why are people doing what they're doing? And we can't have a conversation about why people are doing what they're doing while we're making people wrong for what they're doing. And that's not based on this side or that side. That's just, sides are the problem. When you got sides, you got problems. And right now, we need a lot more love and understanding. It seems trite to say it, but the reason it's trite to say it is it's the wisdom of the ages. If you go to any of the books that have been around a while, they say, you know, anybody can love their friends. Love your enemies.
That's right. Well, Gary, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share?
Been fun. No, I think I've gone over. I'm in trouble already.
No,
I'm in
you're
trouble. I went
This is
over.
great.
But I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.